The crying lynx brought her dying cub to the man. Then the unbelievable happened. The first snowfall had settled over the forest like a hush, blanketing the trees and burying the world in silence. Jonas, a solitary man in his late 50s, lived deep in the heart of the woods in a small cabin that creaked in winter winds and sighed with old timber. A former wildlife medic, he had turned his back on people after losing his wife and son in a car crash a decade ago. Since then, animals had become his only company. Creatures that never judged, never lied, never left. That morning, he had just stepped outside to refill the woodpile when he heard the sound, a low, guttural cry, somewhere between a sob and a wail. Jonas froze. It wasn't a fox's yip or a wolf's distant howl. No, this was closer, rawer, wounded, grieving. He stepped off his porch and followed the sound down the slope trail behind his cabin, boots crunching through the snow. The forest around him was still, as if holding its breath. Then he saw her, a lynx, big, mottled with silver and ash-brown fur, tufted ears alert, shoulders trembling. Her breath came in sharp, foggy bursts, and her yellow eyes shimmered with moisture. She didn't run. She didn't growl. She didn't even flinch. And beside her, half buried in the snow, was a limp, blood-specked bundle of fur. A cub. Jonas instinctively stepped back, knowing how dangerous a mother lynx could be. But the cat did something he could never have expected. She nudged the cub gently toward him with her nose. Then she looked up at Jonas and whimpered. It was a sound an apex predator should have made. It was pleading. Jonas's heart tightened. He looked at the cub, barely breathing, its side rising in jerky gasps. One leg was bent at a sickening angle, and blood soaked the fur near its ribs. Maybe it had fallen from a rock or been attacked. Jonas dropped to one knee, his medic's instincts overriding all hesitation. "You want me to help him?" he whispered, incredulous. The lynx didn't move, only watched him with burning eyes. "All right. Okay," Jonas said softly, hand steady as he slid the cub into his coat. It moaned weakly. The mother lynx followed silently as Jonas hurried back to the cabin. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. Jonas laid the cub on a wool blanket beside the fire. The mother curled protectively near, but let him work. It was unthinkable. Jonas cleaned the wounds. A few punctures, likely from a predator, had gotten infected. The leg was dislocated, not broken. He washed the blood away, packed the wound with ointment he hadn't used in years, and braced the leg with splint made from old popsicle sticks. The cub barely stirred through it all. When Jonas finally sat back, sweat dampening his shirt, he looked at the mother lynx. She had not once moved to stop him. "He's stable," Jonas murmured, "but the fever's high. We'll know in the next few hours." She blinked slowly, almost like a nod. He gave her some raw meat he'd had stored in the cellar. She ate, cautiously at first, then ravenously. Jonas didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire, sipping stale tea and watching the cub's chest rise and fall. Every so often, the mother would crawl closer to her baby, pressing her nose against his fur, then look at Jonas as if asking, "Is it working?" By dawn, the fever broke. The cub mewed softly and licked Jonas's hand. He chuckled through a tear. "You're tougher than you look, kid." The mother lynx let out a soft, rattling purr. Days passed. Jonas expected the mother lynx to leave once her cub was safe, but she didn't. She lingered near the cabin, resting on the porch or in the clearing beside the woodshed, eyes always on the door. Each morning, she watched Jonas feed and tend to her cub. Sometimes she even brought small offerings, a rabbit, a squirrel, once a whole frozen grouse, and left them at the doorstep. The bond was silent, strange, and sacred. Jonas found himself talking again, not to humans, but to her. "I used to have a son, you know," he said one night, sipping hot cocoa with the cub curled beside the hearth. He would have loved you. Wild things fascinated him. My wife, too. She once rescued a raccoon that bit her twice. She didn't care. The lynx tilted her head, as if she understood. Maybe she did. You came to me like you knew I'd help, like you knew I'd lost someone, too. Her eyes gleamed in the firelight. Weeks turned into a month. The cub, Jonas had taken to calling him Ash, grew stronger, stumbling around the cabin, swatting at dangling bootlaces, and sleeping curled up in the old laundry basket. The mother lynx never left for long. Sometimes Jonas would wake in the night to see her silhouette outside the frosted window, watching like a guardian. Then came the day when Ash pounced up onto the windowsill for the first time. He looked out, ears perked. The wild was calling. That night, the mother lynx stepped into the cabin. Jonas didn't stop her. She walked slowly to Ash, who chirped and nuzzled her, then looked back at Jonas as if torn. Jonas swallowed the lump in his throat. It's time, isn't it? The lynx blinked. Ash mewed. Jonas kneeled and touched Ash's head. You'll be all right out there. She'll teach you what I can't. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it. The lynx paused at the threshold, then turned her gaze back to Jonas. And then she brushed her head against his hand. A feline gesture. An ancient, silent thank you. Then she was gone, with Ash bounding after her into the snow-dusted pines. Spring came early that year. Jonas often found paw prints near his porch. Once, a rabbit carcass showed up by the steps. A gift. And sometimes just as dusk fell, he would catch a glimpse of two shapes, graceful and wild, watching from the tree lean. They never stayed long. They didn't have to. The forest had given him something broken. And in healing it, he had healed something in himself, too. He was no longer alone. And somewhere in the great quiet wild, a lynx and her cub remembered the man who answered a mother's cry.